Hello and welcome. I'm Shannon Doty, Manager of Member Content here at APA. Today's webinar is titled Supercharge Your Online Professional Presence for Students and Early Career Psychologists. This presentation will cover the following topics: building out a strong LinkedIn profile, using LinkedIn to share ideas, connect with others for networking and mentoring, and create opportunities for employment or consultation, and getting started with registering a domain name and building a website. Subjects such as appearing higher in search engine results, social media other than LinkedIn, private practice marketing, and leveraging your online presence to become an author, speaker, or consultant will be covered in future webinars. Some important points before we get started. APA does not endorse any products or services. The views expressed in this presentation are those of the presenters and may not reflect the views or policies of the American Psychological Association. Next, this program does not offer CE. During our time together, you will be on mute. You can communicate to us using the questions box located in your webinar control panel. We also have handouts for you to download. You can access them in the handouts box also located in the webinar control panel. These can be downloaded at any time during the presentation. If you have trouble downloading them, don't worry. We'll email you the handouts along with the recording in a few weeks' time. Have a question for our presenter? Type it in using the questions box located in your webinar control panel. Now, allow for me to introduce our speaker for today. Daniel Wendler is the founder of marketingfortherapists.org and the author of Clicking with Clients, Online Marketing for Private Practice Therapists. He is currently a doctoral student in clinical psychology at George Fox University and uses his insights from his previous career in online marketing to help psychologists reach their professional goals online. He's provided online marketing consultation to over 100 therapists, and he's excited to share his insights with students and early career psychologists. You can learn more about Daniel by downloading his biography from the handouts box in your webinar control panel. So now, without further delay, here is Daniel Wendler.
Hello, everybody. Let me turn on my webcam for just a moment so you can all see me. I'm not going to have the webcam on during most of the presentation so we can focus in on the content, but I figured you guys would like to know who is talking to you. I'm really excited to be here and be presenting to all of you. Thank you to APA for this opportunity. And I guess let's jump right in. Before we begin, I want to give you guys just two quick pieces of information to kind of orient you to the webinar. The first is that there's a cat on this screen, and there's a reason for that. It's not just because I like cats, but it's because when you're putting together a presentation, it's usually a good idea to have some images to go along with your slides, maintain interest. But if you go looking for stock photography that relates to online marketing, building a professional presence online, stuff like that, it's really bad. It's usually things like, you know, some guy in a suit pointing at a whiteboard and then somebody wrote the word internet on the whiteboard. It's not very interesting. I don't want to look at it. You probably don't want to look at it. So instead, I'm using pictures of animals with every slide. So every time I advance the slide, you get to meet a new animal. Hopefully that'll be kind of fun. The second thing is that creating an online professional presence, there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. But what I've chose to focus in on for today is supercharging your online professional presence using LinkedIn. And this is probably a little bit surprising to you. You might think, why LinkedIn? Why not any number of other things? But the reason for that is because LinkedIn is really the low-hanging fruit when it comes to supercharging your online professional presence. Many of the other things that you can do to start to build out your online professional presence take many, many hours, if not many days or weeks. But in the course of a lunch break or two, you can get your LinkedIn to be something that really helps boost your online professional presence. And so that's why I'm wanting to start in with that. And let me kind of give you an illustration of what I mean. If you were to Google for me, you would find a search results page that's very similar to this. And what you'll notice is that there's 4 different website links that come up. And the first 3 are things that I've created, but things that took a great deal of effort and work in order for these to appear in the search results. Like I have an Amazon author page, but you only get an Amazon author page if you can write some books and get those on Amazon and do some work to promote that. You know, I have some websites, but I had to learn how to build a website. I had to learn how to get those websites to rise up in the search results. But I also have my LinkedIn profile that just happens to be in the top results. And I really didn't have to do that much to make that happen. I had to do a couple of edits to make sure that the profile was looking really good and it was really visible. I had to try to get that LinkedIn profile to appear on a couple of other professional profiles of me so that some links would go to it. And then after that, anytime that somebody searches for me, my LinkedIn profile, which I've designed to really promote myself professionally, appears and they can find that. So even if you don't have the ability to get yourself an Amazon author page, even if you don't have the time to get a website up and running right now, you can still get your LinkedIn profile up and running, and then that'll be a thing that will show up when somebody searches for you that will help to promote you online. So, you know, again, why LinkedIn? It's the easiest way to improve your online professional presence, but also it has a lot of opportunities that other platforms don't have. It gives you possibilities for collaborating with others, meeting colleagues that could be really valuable relationships, and finding opportunities for both salaried employment and then things like consulting or speaking opportunities. And I'll show you how you can use LinkedIn to find that later on in this webinar. Also, you want LinkedIn because if you're smart about LinkedIn, you'll prevent problems from happening. If you created your LinkedIn back in your undergrad and you haven't touched it since then, it's probably pretty outdated. It probably isn't putting forward the image of you that you want it to. And what if a prospective employer or a current client looks up and finds your old picture of you from undergrad? That's not really what you want to have happen. And then also, if you haven't spent some time thinking about your privacy settings, how you want to handle connections with clients on LinkedIn, things of that nature, you could run into ethical problems. And so it's just a good thing to be careful about. So that's why we're focusing in on LinkedIn for this webinar. Future webinars may have the opportunity to go into other topics, and we will talk about some other things later on today, but the focus is on LinkedIn, and I hope you kind of have a sense for why that's the case. So here's our roadmap for what we're going to discuss about LinkedIn. The first thing is that we're going to talk about how to make an amazing profile. And this is really the biggest impact part of the webinar, because this is something that, again, in the course of a couple hours, you can do, and then it's going to give you an impact over the next several years. The second is that I want to introduce you to some features of LinkedIn that you can use for collaborating with others, finding job opportunities, things of that nature. And then finally, I want to take just a few moments to orient you to some other easy opportunities to kind of grow your professional presence online, some things for you to start thinking about and potentially act on. So here we go. Your LinkedIn profile featuring ducks. So your LinkedIn profile has a lot of different sections. It's got a photo, it's got a name, it's got the link to the profile, it's got what's called a headline, summary, a section with your work experience, and then your recommendations and accomplishments. If you're not quite sure what all these things are, that's totally okay. We're going to talk about each one of these in turn. And then I'll kind of give you advice for how to make each section of your profile fully optimized so that LinkedIn is giving you the best possible benefit to your online professional presence. What I will say is that because I want to make sure that there's time to get through all of the content and to have time for questions at the end, I'm going probably a little bit fast through this material, but what I strongly recommend is that you get the webinar recording when it's released and then go back and listen to each section that I discuss, and then put it on pause, make those changes to that part of your profile, and then go on to the next part of the profile. So this is really something that's designed to be kind of a tool that you use as you are working, rather than just something that you listen to once and then that's it. Although if you do get everything you need to just from listening to it once, I suppose that's good too. So the very top of your profile is your photo. And this is something that unfortunately a lot of people get wrong, even though it's pretty straightforward. Basically, your profile, you want it to be professional. You want the quality to be professional, and so that means that like don't have it look grainy and low resolution, don't have the lighting be bad. You want to be dressed professionally. You want to have a professional background. There shouldn't be anybody else in the picture. Usually, I mean, it's 2018, just about everybody has a smartphone camera that's more than capable of taking an adequate LinkedIn photo, but you just want to put a little bit of extra effort into it. Like wear the sorts of clothes that you would wear to meet with a client. Make sure that you're looking good. Usually for your profile photo, you want to take a picture just of your head, because when somebody sees the thumbnail, they are only going to recognize it if it's your head. If it's your whole body, it's going to be too small. But sometimes you might have a good reason for doing something else. For instance, my photo is a picture of me speaking on a stage because I want to establish myself as a speaker. And so that's a worthwhile thing. But so if you have a reason to be a little bit more creative, you can do that. But otherwise, just the head is ideal. And then also every couple of years, make sure that you update your photo, because if it looks very different from how you look right now, then people can feel misled, and it's just not a good thing to have happen. So that is your photo. And then you also have to put in your name. You guys all probably know your name. So you would think that this section would be totally straightforward, but actually there's a couple of nuances. The first thing is that if you want your credentials to appear in your name in your LinkedIn profile, the way that you do that is by adding them to your last name. So for instance, I have an MA, and so if I wanted my LinkedIn profile to show that I have an MA, I would go to the last name box, and then instead of Wendler, I would have Wendler space MA. I probably am not going to do that at this point. I don't care as much about promoting just my MA, but once I have my doctorate, I probably will go in and add the PsyD to the end of my last name so that everybody knows that I've earned my doctorate. Also, you can include your former names. And so if you maybe got married and you change your last name, or you're in the witness protection program and you've got a whole new name, something like that, you can then put in your former name, and then that way people can find you using both your current name and your former name. The other thing that you should be doing as you're setting up your name is also creating a custom URL for your profile. And what I mean by that is, by default, the link to your LinkedIn profile is just a string of gobbledygook. But what you are able to do is you are able to make the link something that actually contains your name. So for instance, my link, if you go to linkedin.com/in/dwendler, that takes you to my LinkedIn profile. And because it has my initial and my last name in there, that makes it more likely that the search engines will realize that it relates to me, and then it's more likely to show up in the search results. So that's a very easy change to make, to just change your URL to be your first and your last name, or your first initial and your last name, or something like that that kind of resembles you. Moving on, there is the headline. And the headline by default, that's the part of the LinkedIn profile that that usually by default will say your job title and then your employer. So if I am a staff psychologist at XYZ Clinic, it would say Daniel Wendler, staff psychologist at XYZ Clinic. The problem is that this is really boring, and it also doesn't tell you all that much. Like, okay, I'm a staff psychologist, but what kind of work do I do? What kind of patients do I work with? Am I interested in some new jobs or collaboration opportunities? You don't know any of that from looking at this headline. So the default wastes this critical real estate, because the headline, it's not only the first thing that people see when they visit your profile, but it's the first, but it's something that's visible even before they visit your profile, just by seeing your name in the search results or something like that. Your headline has the ability to come up. And you're not going to get in trouble for changing this headline. You're not required to mention your exact title. You're not required to mention your employer. You can do whatever you want. And so the best practice here is to design your headline around your ideal opportunity. And what I mean by that is, imagine that there's something that you want professionally. Maybe it is an opportunity to collaborate on research. Maybe it's a postdoc opportunity. Maybe it's the chance to do a speaking engagement or to get a new job. If somebody who knew about that opportunity and might offer it to you was browsing through LinkedIn, what is something that they might see in your headline that would cause them to say, oh, I want to reach out to this person and let them know the opportunity. That's what it means to design your headline around your ideal opportunity. And I'll give you some examples of that. So this is a screenshot of another user on LinkedIn. I've blocked out their personal information for privacy. And you can see that they've set up their headline to say professional counselor, comma, speaker. And this is a very basic like headline, but it still goes beyond just saying, oh, I'm a counselor at so-and-so clinic, because it includes that speaker word. And so let's say I'm a colleague of this person and I add them on LinkedIn, and then I see this headline. What if I'm organizing a conference? What if I'm putting together a webinar for APA and I need some speakers? The fact that I notice, oh, this person has established themselves as a speaker, now I have the ability to give them a speaking opportunity if that is something that I might have in my back pocket. And then if they hadn't put that in their header, I might never have known that they were interested in speaking opportunities. So again, it can just be as simple as adding a single word, or you can go a little bit more elaborate. So this is somebody who is not in mental health, but they work in marketing, and they have a two-part headline. So they say marketing strategist, speaker, and content creator. But then you might look at that and say, okay, well, what does marketing strategist mean? So then they explain it to you in the second part. They say, I help brands develop stellar marketing strategies that truly work. And so if you are, maybe you own a business, maybe you're an executive and you need help putting together a marketing campaign, if you happen to come across this person's profile, you're able to see not just that they're a marketing strategist, but you're able to hear their voice a little bit in their headline, and you're able to see explained what it is that they could do for you. And then that way, if you are interested in hiring somebody for helping you with your marketing strategy, this person, you know, this person has stood out compared to every other person on LinkedIn that just says, you know, marketing strategist at XYZ agency. You'll also notice that this person's background, they put in a picture of San Francisco. You do have the ability to change the default background of your profile. I don't know that you necessarily need to, but if maybe you had a picture of your clinic or the logo of the organization that you worked for, you could spruce up your profile a little bit through that. It's not that important, but just in case you were wondering. So then this is my headline. You'll notice that I did have a little custom photo at the top that has the logo of my website. Here's my dynamic speaking picture. And then you'll see that I did the headline where I'm really, my opportunity that I want people to do on LinkedIn is really two things. Number one, I want them to visit my websites. And so I put my websites right front and center to make it very easy for somebody to be curious and then go and visit my websites. And then I also am looking for speaking engagements. And so I said, oh, I'm a keynote speaker and here's some things that I speak on. And then that way, if somebody, you know, maybe one of my old friends from my undergrad reconnects with me after several years, now they're instantly going to know, oh, Daniel has some websites now, I'm going to check them out. Or, oh, Daniel does speaking on these things. Maybe I know of an opportunity that he might be interested in. And so that way, even before somebody reads my profile, even before somebody starts a conversation with me, they know about the sort of opportunities that I'm interested in. You'll also notice that I'm bragging a little bit. Like I could just say that I'm a speaker, but I say that I'm a keynote speaker. And so you want to be accurate and honest. I have done keynote speaking, but you don't need to be afraid to toot your horn a little bit. So those are some examples of headlines that are real and living out in the world. But you might wonder, okay, none of those exactly fit what I'm doing. How do I write a profile? How do I write a headline that kind of fits where I'm at in my career? And so these are some examples. Let's say you are, in your second year of your graduate program, or I guess maybe further along. Maybe you're in, your internship, or you're in your fourth year or something like that. You might say, PsyD student at Example University looking for eating disorder postdoc opportunities. And so if a colleague, a supervisor, whoever happens to connect with you on LinkedIn, now they know, oh, you're really interested in eating disorders. You're thinking ahead. You're thinking ahead to postdoc opportunities, and then they might be able to say, hey, I know a director of an eating disorder clinic. I'd be happy to put you in touch with her, whatever. You're able to put yourself out there for that opportunity. Or you might say, I'm a clinical psychologist at XYZ clinic. I'm a specialist in teen anxiety and depression. And this is a little bit less targeted about looking for opportunities, but it's just being more deliberate about showing what your areas of expertise are. So then if somebody encounters your profile and they need somebody who's an expert in teen anxiety and depression, now they know that you're the person to talk to. Or let's say you're on more of a research track. You might say, I'm a research assistant to Dr. So-and-so. But if you just say that, people aren't really going to know what that means. But then if you add one more line and you say, I help discover evidence-based autism interventions, not only does that make you look kind of cool, but it also means that, again, anybody looking at your profile at a glance is going to sort of know what you can offer and what kind of opportunities are going to be valuable for you. So that's the headline. The next part of your profile is your summary. And the headline is a sentence or two. Your summary is a couple of paragraphs. And it's basically a chance for you to give a little short biography of yourself. And there's a few things to keep in mind as you put together your summary to make sure that your LinkedIn profile helps you take advantage of every opportunity that potentially could come your way. The first is that the initial 3 lines of your summary are the most critical, because if you look at somebody's LinkedIn profile, by default, LinkedIn shows you the first 3 lines of the summary, and then everything else is hidden and requires you to click a button to show the rest of it. So a lot of people will just read the first 3 lines, and then if there's nothing in there to catch their interest, they're not going to read the rest. And so you want to be sort of deliberate to put your best attention-grabbing stuff in the first couple of sentences of your summary. The second is that a lot of people, when they write their summary, they just sort of do a stream of consciousness thing where they just say everything that they can think of about themselves, or they make it sound like a dating profile and they're like, oh, you know, here are my hobbies. Like, you don't really want to do any of those things. What you want to do is you want to follow sort of two different strategies, and you can kind of experiment and see which strategy works for you. The first strategy is to write just sort of a summary of your credentials and accomplishments, where you just sort of be like, you know, I've done this and this, I'm good at this and this, boom, 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 boom. The second is to write a little bit more of a narrative approach, where you let people feel your voice a little bit more, and you also usually are going to write a little bit longer. And I'll show you examples of each of these summaries. But I also want to say one other thing to keep in mind, which is that every summary, no matter what style you use, should include a call to action. And what that means is that you should imagine, you know, if somebody comes to my profile and like, what would I want them to do? What are things that would be beneficial for me that a reader of my profile could do? So if, let's say, you are you know, a researcher and you're looking for collaborators, you might say, you know, if you're interested in collaborating with me on, you know, anxiety research, please email me here. Or if you are, you know, looking for employment, if you say, you know, if you have, you know, any employment opportunities, please contact me here, stuff like that. So let's jump into examples. And I see that we are getting some questions that are coming in, but what I want to do is I want to wait until the end and then answer every question that I can. And also, I will provide a link to my website. And if you have questions that were not answered during the webinar, you can go ahead to my website and send me questions, and I'll do my best to answer via email. So moving on, this is my summary. And you see that I'm kind of following the credentials and accomplishments approach. I'm just sort of saying, like, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this. And I, like, you don't really hear my voice in this, but that's okay, because all of these other things capture my voice much better than my LinkedIn summary would ever do. And so what I want you to do as you read this is I want you to go to some of these things that I'm mentioning. I want you to go to my websites. I want you to look at one of my TEDx talks that I've done. I want you to pick up a copy of one of my books. And that will allow you to get to know me. And so that's why I'm focused more on my accomplishments and the things that are off the site. I also have not just one, but 2 calls to action, because I'm interested in getting more speaking engagements, and then I'm interested in getting marketing clients. So I say, if you want to hire me for a speaking engagement, here's a website that you can go to where you can do that. And if you're interested in hiring me for marketing, here's a website where you can do that. So that's an example of one style. And then Kyler, who will be doing some presentations later in the week, he did the more narrative style. So he kind of he sort of wanted to highlight three different sort of facets of who he is professionally. Behavioral health, research, and then public speaking. And then he wrote like a little narrative about each one. And you see that he, again, you hear his voice and his passion a little bit more. He talks about how he feels engaged and alive when working in healthcare systems. That gives you a little bit more of a feel for who he is, but it also means that his summary is a little bit longer. You'll also notice that as you look at this, he does have a call to action. He says, if you have opportunities for research, I'm always looking to collaborate. And so you can see that Kyler is probably the most interested in research opportunities, and so that's what he's highlighting. So these are kind of the two approaches that you can take with your summary. And if you're not quite sure which one works the best, I would say just write both of them. Like write one where you just sort of rattle off your accomplishments and the things that you've done. Write one where you've done a narrative summary, and then sort of compare them and see which one fits you better. Depending on where you are in the career, you'll also probably be drawn more to one or to the other. So if, for instance, you're early in your career, or you're unemployed, or for whatever reason you don't have a ton of accomplishments that you can rattle off that would be relevant, then doing a more narrative summary where you can talk a little bit more about your passions and your strengths rather than your accomplishments, that could be the right approach. Whereas if you are I guess this is students and early career psychologists, so this might not be relevant to you guys today, but if you are way down the road and you're a professor emeritus at some big university and you've published, 70 papers or whatever, then maybe it makes sense to just rattle off the things that you've done, because then that's going to make the most sense. But I think for most of the people in this audience, I think either one of these options would work just fine. So just play with it and see which one works for you. So that's the summary. And then the next part is the position section, where you're able to sort of add your work experience. And most people fall into sort of the Goldilocks trap here. They either put in too much or too little. And the too much means that they include every position that they've ever done back to when they were a lifeguard in high school. And then people look at that and then they just get overwhelmed. They're like, what is this person's story? What is this person good at? It's hard to tell because there's so much noise and not a lot of signal. Or they just add like their most recent position, and then you're like, did you just start working a year ago? Like, have you ever worked before? What's the deal? And so the place to balance in the middle is to be selective about what positions you add. And so you want to generally add in work experience if there's a reason for it. If you feel like this is something that highlights something significant about my expertise, or this is something where if I don't have this included, people might ask questions about this big gap of time or whatever. But basically, you're trying to tell a story about yourself with the positions that you choose. And your goal should be that, like, after somebody reads through all of the positions, they should come away with a certain impression of you. And I think if you can go into it with that desired impression in mind, like if you say, I want somebody to get the sense that I'm a really well-trained pediatric, clinician, or I want somebody to get the sense that I am really comfortable wearing a lot of different hats and I'm a fast learner and you can throw me into whatever, or whatever else it might be. But if you've got if you start with a goal in mind and then you choose your positions based on that, then you're going to be able to frame this section in the most effective way. Because it's not a CV, you don't have to include everything. You get to choose what you include in order to tell a story. And then as you are also writing these positions, the temptation is to just put in some bullet points. But what that does is that tends to be pretty boring to people. They don't really want to read through a lot of bullet points. And so what I recommend instead is that you write sort of a narrative summary where you tell the story of the position a little bit more. And then that's going to engage people more, and it's going to make them more likely to actually remember the cool accomplishments that you did. And then finally, you should consider including media attachments. And I'll tell you what I mean by that with this next screenshot. So this is a example position that I have on my profile of a supplemental practicum that I did where I did risk assessments and consultation in hospital emergency departments. And you see that instead of doing bullet points, I have it written in a way that's a little bit more attractive to read. I've got a lot of white space. I've got 2 paragraphs where I could have slurped it all together into one. And so it's going to be a little bit easier for somebody to look at that and see, what I've done here and maybe be impressed by that. And then also you have the ability within LinkedIn to attach media. So as part of this practicum, I did some research and I put together a training on best practices for using a particular evidence-based approach to treating suicidality. And then what I did on LinkedIn is I just uploaded my slides. And so that way, anybody who comes to my LinkedIn can see, oh, this is a presentation that Daniel did, and they can click through my slides and they can maybe learn something or maybe be impressed by the work that I've done. You want to be a little bit careful in adding media because you definitely don't want to add anything that relates to a client, even if it's de-identified. A client could still theoretically come to your LinkedIn profile and see the case study that you wrote about them, and that's really not a good thing. So you don't want to include anything that is, a client could ever recognize. But if you've done like a presentation, if you've put together a research paper and you have the rights to upload it, just putting all of that stuff on your LinkedIn profile gives you the chance to sort of show off the important work that you've done. So that is the position section. There's a couple of other things on your LinkedIn profile that I want to talk through real quick. These are not as important as the initial things. So if your head is kind of spinning at this point, don't worry about this stuff. But if you really want to dot every I and cross every T, there's a couple of other things that you can do on your profile. The first is that you can solicit recommendations. So you can ask people that are in your network to basically write you a letter of recommendation, and then that will just appear in your profile and anybody can read it. This can be a pretty powerful tool if you can get a pretty good recommendation. And so, as you are sort of generally going through your graduate training, you're usually having people write you letters of recommendation anyway. Like, when you apply to your internship, you'll have people write you letters of recommendation. And so it might make sense to just ask them, hey, could you also post that letter of recommendation on LinkedIn? Because then people in the future are able to see the nice things that they've said about you also. You can also list your accomplishments, like if you've won an award, if you won a scholarship, you can put it on your LinkedIn profile. I guess that would be good if you won something really prestigious, but it's way down at the bottom of your profile, and so I don't think that most people are going to notice or care. And then finally, LinkedIn has this feature called skills and endorsements, where you can say, I'm good at these, like I'm good at therapy, I'm good at psychological assessment, and then other people in your network can vote on it and be like, yeah, he's good at therapy. I don't think that this is really worth your time trying to deal with because it's just not a very useful data point. Like if I have 5 people that vote for me that I'm good at therapy and Kyler has 10 people that vote for him that he's good at therapy, does that mean that Kyler is twice as good at therapy, or does it just mean that he has more people in his network that are willing to vote for him? So I don't think that most people are going to make any kind of decision based on the skills and endorsement section. So I would just kind of ignore that. Moving on, just a couple of other things about using LinkedIn. So you've created your profile, and it is beautiful. You are so proud. You can't wait to just print it off and show it to everybody. But now, what do you use your profile for? How do you make the most of LinkedIn? And so I will say that even if you don't do anything on LinkedIn, having a good profile is still beneficial because then when other people look you up, it's there, it's visible, it might appear in the Google search results, but you can get the most out of your profile if you use some of the other LinkedIn features. The most basic LinkedIn feature is making connections with other people. It is a social network after all. And so usually it's totally fine to ask to connect with current or former colleagues. You want to make sure that you're connecting with people that you at least kind of new. So if somebody was in the same organization, but you never talked to them, you never worked with them, then that's a little bit weird. But as long as you had any kind of a relationship with somebody else, usually people won't mind being asked to connect. It's not quite as personal as like asking to connect on Facebook or something like that. And then when you are in the process of reaching out and connecting to somebody, that can be a really good opportunity to, in your introductory message, to maybe offer them a recommendation. Say, I'd love to connect with you, and by the way, I really appreciated, the therapy group that we ran together, and I'd love to write a recommendation for you on that. You might also ask for a recommendation in return and be like, and if you had a little bit of free time, I would also appreciate if you could make a recommendation for me. Again, having recommendations on your profile is not the most important thing, but it can sometimes be helpful to be strategic about getting a couple, and the easiest way to do that is as you're making those connections. You also have the opportunity with LinkedIn to spread ideas to people in your network, or sometimes LinkedIn will take the things that you post and spread them even wider. So it's a chance for you to kind of get known as a thought leader, or share some idea or research finding that you think people would find helpful. And there's two ways that you can do that. One is that LinkedIn has the ability for you to write articles, kind of like if you were to post on a blog, and then those will live on LinkedIn. They'll be visible from your profile, and then those will get shared with your network. You can also post links, just like Facebook or Twitter. You post links to something, outside LinkedIn. And if you are judicious in how you write new articles for LinkedIn or post links to LinkedIn, that can be a really good way of building an audience and spreading some ideas. But you want to be really careful, because the thing about LinkedIn is that most people don't share stuff on it all that often. And what that means is that if you are on LinkedIn every 2 days posting something new, then when somebody logs into LinkedIn, their feed is just going to be all you all the time. And they might feel overwhelmed by that, or they might feel like, oh, the other people that I want to hear from are getting buried. And so they're more likely to then disconnect from you or mute you or do something else in response. So what I usually suggest is that you kind of space it out. Maybe no more than once a week you would post something to LinkedIn, if that, and then also make sure that the things that you post are thoughtful and high quality. And then that way, people are more likely to want to listen to what you have to say, instead of just saying, oh, there goes Daniel, posting another link to his blog for the 5th time this week. I'm going to ignore him. So those are things that you can kind of do within your existing network, people that you already know. But LinkedIn also gives you the chance to meet other people and collaborate with them, look for opportunities, etc. And the best way to do that is through LinkedIn groups. And groups are basically just places where you can, talk to other people that share some kind of interest. LinkedIn doesn't make it super easy to find groups. It's a little bit of a hassle. So I'll kind of walk you through the process, and then if you're like, oh, that was too fast, I'm going to LinkedIn and it's the next day and I don't know how, again, you can look at the recording of the webinar, or you can just search online for how to find LinkedIn groups and you can find tutorials. But the way that you do it is you search for something that would be the topic of a group that you're interested in. So you might search for psychotherapy, you might search for APA division if you're looking for APA division groups. Then by default, LinkedIn will show you everything. So not just groups, but also business pages and people and whatever. So then you click on more, and then you click on groups, and then it will show you just the groups that have that keyword in their title. And so usually you want to, so what I would suggest is try several different kinds of searches and see what comes up. And I have some examples: psychological association, APA division, psychotherapy, mental health professionals. Those will give you the chance to maybe find some groups. You can also search for like your local area, see if there's people in your area that might have started a group already that you can join, maybe your city or your state. But what you might find is that as you look for groups, you don't find anything for the kind of group that you wanted. Like maybe you were really interested in discussing treatments for a particular condition. Well, you can create your own group. You can click on work, and then you can click on groups, You can click on My Groups to see existing groups or create a new one. There's also a Discover feature where you can see groups that LinkedIn recommends to you. It's not incredibly useful, but you can look and see what they recommend. Sometimes their algorithm gets lucky. So there's one other thing to consider as far as LinkedIn features, and that is your privacy settings. If you want to get to your privacy settings, you click on Me in the top menu, and then Settings and Privacy, and then Privacy. And then you can adjust your settings according to your comfort level. What I've done is I've made my LinkedIn profile very public and very open because I want anybody to be able to find it because maybe they have an opportunity for me. But I've also made sure that everything on my LinkedIn profile is something that I wouldn't mind the public knowing about me. If your goals are different, maybe you just want to use LinkedIn to collaborate with other people, or maybe you're worried about your clients finding you, whatever, you can then change your privacy settings according to your comfort level. And then while you're adjusting your privacy settings on LinkedIn, I also suggest searching for yourself on Google so that you are able to then see, is there anything else where you might need to change your privacy settings? Like, is your Instagram with all of your vacation photos, in a swimsuit on the beach, is that showing up where a client or an employer could see it? And then in that case, maybe change your privacy settings. So ethical concerns, you guys probably have this on your radar also, but usually I recommend against connecting with clients on LinkedIn. It just opens up a whole host of problems, at least potentially. Don't publish any information about clients, even if it's de-identified, because a client could still realize, hey, you're talking about me. And then consider posting a social media policy, either somewhere on your practice website or in your informed consent paperwork, where you essentially just tell clients, hey, if you connect with me on social media, I'm not going to respond to you, and I do that to protect your privacy. And then that way there's no surprises. There's a resource that I'll link to at the end, which goes into a lot more detail about ethics on LinkedIn and social media. And so you can dig into that one. And Kyler also talks more in depth about ethical concerns in his webinar. So one final tip about LinkedIn. Once you finish setting up your beautiful new LinkedIn profile, make a recurring calendar alert in Google Calendar or Outlook or whatever it is that you use to check back on your LinkedIn profile once a year and then update it. And if you are updating your profile once a year, it'll usually only take a few minutes every time, but then that way you make sure that nothing gets outdated, it's still reflecting the opportunities that you're looking for, any new positions are added in, etc. And so you might also consider linking to your LinkedIn from other professional sites. So if you have a page on a therapy clinic that you work at, or you are a professor at a university and you have a faculty page, if you link to your LinkedIn, that makes it more likely that your LinkedIn will show up, or that people will be able to discover it. And then, going back again to the privacy issue, make sure that your other personal social media is appropriately privacy protected, because having a really professional LinkedIn doesn't help you if you have really unprofessional other social media. So that is LinkedIn. I'm going to take a moment to wet my whistle. So we're getting a lot of great questions coming in, and so I'm going to keep on zooming so we can get to the end, and then there will be time to get to those questions. But I want to also take a couple of moments just to talk about things beyond LinkedIn, and I want to give you guys let's assume that you've done all of this for your LinkedIn profile is ready to go, and you want to do a couple of other things to supercharge your professional presence, but you don't want to wait until my next webinar. I'll tell you something that you can do in the course of a couple minutes, something you can do in the course of several hours, and then something that you can do maybe over the course of weeks or months. So here we go. If you have 10 minutes, the best thing that you can do for your online professional presence is to get your own domain name. And a domain name is basically just a way for you to make it so that if somebody types in your domain name into a web browser, it will take them to whatever place on the web you want to take them. So I registered danielwendler.com. And so if you go to danielwendler.com, I have set it up so that it goes to a website that I've created. But I just as easily could have set it up to make danielwendler.com take you to my LinkedIn page or to my faculty page if I was a faculty member, or wherever else I wanted to take you. And so it's a really handy thing to have, but the problem is that domain names are first come, first serve. So when you register a domain name, nobody else can have it unless you stop paying for it, and then it expires and somebody else can grab it. So you can register a domain name for about $10 to $15 per year. And the best place to get a domain name is at namecheap.com. There's other places that will also let you register them, but Namecheap is one of the better ones. So I suggest that you go there. And then what I suggest you do is to go to namecheap.com and then see if yourname.com is available. So, if your name is like Kyler Shumway, like my friend, you would see if kylershumway.com was available, and it wouldn't be because Kyler has already registered that. That was a bad example, I apologize. But you get my idea. You want to go and see if yourname.com is available, and if it is, I would just grab it. Pay the $10 a year, because that way you prevent somebody else from coming along and snagging it up. And then maybe if somebody searches for your name, they find out about this other person instead, and that makes it much harder to get established with an online professional presence. Even if you're not ready to use it yet, even if you're still in your first year of graduate school, grabbing it now is an investment in your future, so that down the road, you have the opportunity to use that. If for whatever reason yourname.com is taken, you might think about grabbing dryourname.com or yourname PhD or yournamescid.com, something like that. Because maybe you're a student, and so you wouldn't want to necessarily use that domain until you actually received your doctorate, but then it would be locked down and ready for you to use as soon as you do in fact graduate. As you register your domain name, don't sign up for anything else. Sometimes Namecheap will upsell you and say, oh, do you want email? Do you want this? Do you want that? You don't need any of those things. Just get your domain name, and then that way nobody else can take it. And if you don't have a website and you're not sure what to do with your domain name, just set it up to send people to your new fancy LinkedIn. And if you're not sure how to do that, you can talk to the Namecheap support, and they will do that for you. So it only takes 10 minutes and $10 a year to set up your domain name. So I suggest that all of you, if it's available, grab yourname.com. If you have several hours, maybe the course of a weekend, you could get a basic website up and running. And then that's really handy as maybe a hub point for a lot of things down the road. But even just starting out, it's kind of an online business card where you can put your name, your bio, your CV, a contact form, stuff like that. And then that way you can start building an online presence. Also, if you have a portfolio of some kind, maybe you've done some research projects, maybe you have done some writing, you can then start putting that on your personal website and then grow that over time. And if you go out and you find, like, let's say you do a speaking opportunity somewhere, you can then send people back to your website and start building an audience. So how do you actually make a website? The good news is that there is now a lot of pretty affordable tools for building a website yourself. You can use Wix.com, Weebly.com, Squarespace.com. There's other ones that are out there, but basically there's a lot of do-it-yourself options that'll usually cost you between $5 to $15 a month, and you don't have to learn any kind of coding. You don't have to take a course in web design, although it is usually helpful to do some research so you know what you're doing, but you can kind of put together a basic website just on your own using those services. Also, if you don't want to do it yourself and you want some professional help, you can hire services that specialize in making websites for therapists and psychologists. Brightervision.com is one, therapysites.com is another. These guys are more expensive. They're going to run you about $60 a month. And so it's probably not worth it if you're a student, unless you just have inherited a large sum of money and you want to spend it on a website. I guess that would be okay. But if you are starting your own practice, or if you really want to be serious about establishing yourself as a speaker or a consultant, something like that, it might make sense to spend the extra money and have a professional website. And so those are options. So again, getting a website launched and getting it looking kind of good, that's going to take you several hours. And I guarantee you, if you've never built a website before, the first one that you try to make is not going to look very good. But if you're willing to work at it, you're willing to get feedback and listen to the feedback, you're willing to read up on some guides on web design, how to make your websites look good, etc. Then over, it really wouldn't take that long for you to have a basic website that looks pretty good and is pretty functional. And that not only does that create the opportunity for future growth, but even just having a website makes you stand out compared to every other postdoc applicant or whatever who is not visible on the web at all. And then let's say, as one final thing, let's say you have, you want to plan for the next weeks and months ahead. The biggest way to build an online presence is to share your knowledge. And what I mean by that is that even if you're in your first year of graduate school and you've only taken one semester so far, you still have more psychological knowledge than most people on planet Earth ever will. And so find ways to share that knowledge. Like, don't go outside the bounds of your competence, but see if there is some kind of publication that you could write an article for, where you could talk about something that you've learned. See if there's an interview or a speaking engagement, maybe in your local area or online, or create some content for your website. Maybe think about writing an ebook or something that people could download. And then as you create those things, then you can link back to your website. And then that way you can start to build a following, you can start to build an audience. I could talk for an hour on this easily, and we're close to the end of our time, so I won't go more into detail on this. But again, in future webinars, I might have the opportunity to go more into detail, and then I can discuss this more in the questions. So thank you guys so much for the opportunity to be here. I guess we will now move on to the Q&A. So should I read through some of the questions that have come in, or do you guys want to choose ones to feed to me? What feels like the best option here?
Well, I actually will ask you some questions that have been submitted by our audience. There have been some great ones. So the first one is, how would you approach the LinkedIn profile if you are currently unemployed but actively looking for positions? How then can you frame the profile in order to seek opportunities?
Yeah, so I think what I would then do, I would modify your headline to talk about your strengths and your skill set. So I wouldn't say like I'm unemployed or something like that. I would say something like, specialist in this thing that I'm a specialist in, or clinician focused on this stuff. And then in the second part of my headline, I might say something like, looking for full-time opportunities or something of that nature. And so that way you're leading with your strength, you're leading with the thing that you're good at, and then you're also mentioning, hey, by the way, I'm looking for work currently. And then same thing in your summary. I would lead with your strength, with your expertise, with the reasons why anybody would be happy to have you on your team. And then I would kind of close with a call to action that would say something like, I'm currently actively pursuing a new employment opportunity. And so if you are aware of anybody that might be interested in bringing me on to their practice, please contact me here. You don't even need to necessarily mention, hey, I'm currently unemployed. You can just say, I'm currently looking for a new opportunity.
Great. The next question is, I have work experience that's not necessarily related to psychology, but could help with showing more diverse life experiences. Should I include it?
Yeah. So I think that that's a personal question, like in the sense that I don't think that there's a wrong answer. I think on my profile, I do include some of the things that I did before I started my graduate program, because I think that those are kind of impressive. They show that I have some management experience, et cetera. But I think potentially as I get further along in my career, I might take those off because they'll be less and less relevant as time goes by. So I think that what I would say is it really is kind of up to you. If you feel like those things, if somebody would read that and they would be more likely to want to work with you, then I would say leave them in. And if you say, you know what, these aren't really adding anything new, then I would leave them off. But if they make your profile stronger, then there's no reason why you can't have them.
Okay. And the next question is, as a doctoral student, what is the proper LinkedIn etiquette to networking, particularly seeking mentors and internship opportunities?
Yeah. So I think that LinkedIn in general is not as well set up for um, trying to contact people that you don't know at all. Like, I mean, you can do it. You can say, hey, please connect with me, and then you can write a message. But a lot of times people don't they don't check their LinkedIn messages all that often. They don't, they might not see your invitation for quite a while. And so what I would usually suggest if you're trying to start a connection with somebody is that you find their email address and then you contact them through that. And so in many cases, faculty will have their email address posted. There might be a staff page, on a clinic, or you might even just be able to contact the clinic and say, hey, I'm really interested in getting in touch with Dr. So-and-so. Would it be possible for me to have their email address? And then if you can directly email that person, then I think that you have a much higher chance of that person seeing your message. But the way that you can bring LinkedIn into it is that when you email them, you can say, hey, like blah, 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 I'm so interested in you, blah, 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 blah. And then, if you want to learn a little bit more about me, you can see a summary of my experiences at my LinkedIn profile, which is here, or you can read my full CV, which is here.
Great. The next question is, how secure should your personal social media accounts be? And is it okay to share political or social justice advocacy opinions and work?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think the amount that your personal social media needs to be secure. It a little bit depends on what kinds of things you're putting on there and how private you want it to be. And that goes both for things that are maybe potentially controversial or offensive. Those are things that you would want to have more privacy around potentially, but then also things that are just really personal. Like, I don't know that if I have a close family member that passes away, I don't know that I would want an employer to see my post about that, or a client to see my post about that necessarily. So I think that you want to think about how do you use your personal social media, and then based on how you use it, be more or less protective around your privacy. And then I think the question as far as like, should you use social media to post advocacy or political things? I think that can be tricky because in some cases that can be controversial, but also it can be something that's really important and meaningful to you. And so what my suggestion would be is that you want to think of it in terms of two audiences. You want to think of it in terms of employers who could look at a post about an advocacy issue or a political issue and decide not to employ you as a result of that. And honestly, I would not be as concerned about that, because for me, if there was something that I was so passionate about that I was posting it to social media, if somebody didn't want to hire me over that thing, I probably wouldn't want to work there. That probably wouldn't be a really good fit for me. And so I don't think, I mean, maybe if you're in a much more precarious financial situation, you might say, you know what, I need any job I can get, and so it's not worth the risk. But I think in general, it maybe would make sense to post what you're passionate about, even if it would cause you to lose an employment opportunity. But there's another thing to consider, which is that your clients, or your students, if you're in academia, might be reading your social media also. And so what happens if you post something political and then a client or a student who's from the opposite side of the political spectrum reads that thing? Is that going to impact their ability to receive therapy from you, or their ability to receive mentorship from you? And I don't think that you have to not post those things, but I think that you have to kind of remember the human side of the other side as you are posting that, so that even if a client reads your political post and disagrees with it, they would still feel safe to work with you in therapy or whatever else they might do. And I think as long as you can follow that, I don't think that there's any reason not to post something that you're passionate about.
Okay, and finally, our last question. What are your thoughts about practitioners that have online testimonials about their services and its impact on confidentiality?
Yeah. So I honestly think that it's a uh, probably not super ethical to do that because there's that power differential. So if you ask somebody for a testimonial, maybe they don't feel like they could say no, even if they want to say no, or maybe they don't feel like they could honestly give a fair testimonial, even if they really wanted to. And there's also the chance that somebody might read the testimonial and realize that, this person, like who this person was. So I usually recommend against that. What I suggest as an alternative is to publish, is to do some kind of outcome tracking, which, there's a variety of ways where you can track the effectiveness of your therapy that are evidence-based. And so what I suggest is doing that kind of outcome tracking and then publishing the results of the outcome tracking. So if you say something like, hey, on this measure, 85% of my clients showed improvement over 8 weeks. I think that can be maybe just as effective as a testimonial. And it's also going to be, I think, avoiding those ethical issues.
Great. Well, thank you so much for answering those questions and for sharing all of that wonderful information. I also hear you have a few resources that you'd like to share with our audience. Want to tell us about those?
Sure. So I've got just three links to leave you guys with. The first one is my website, marketingfortherapists.org. And that has the ability for you to contact me if you've got any follow-up questions. It also has an extensive library of free articles on building an online presence that you can read. So it's got, if you want more information about choosing a domain name, if you want tips on web design or search engine optimization, all of that is available on that website. And I've written it, to kind of be a good online marketing 101 resource. There's also a psychologist called Dr. Keely Combs, who's written extensively about ethics as it pertains to social media. And so she is a fantastic resource for learning how to develop a social media policy and make sure that you're ethical on social media. And so I have a link to her page. And then finally, HubSpot is an online marketing organization, and they've written a post about how to improve your LinkedIn profile. And so that's a great supplement to this presentation. If you want a few more tips for improving your profile, they are a really good place to go. So I guess that is it, but thank you guys so much for attending the webinar. If you have other things that you'd like me to speak on, please make sure that you include that in the survey afterwards. And APA, thank you so much for hosting me.
Oh, well, thank you so much for joining us, Daniel, and thank you to all of our listeners for your participation. A recording of this presentation will be emailed to everyone in 2 weeks' time. The recording will include links to the handouts in case you've had trouble downloading them today. And as soon as the webinar has ended, like Daniel said, a short survey will appear on your screen. We hope you'll take a few minutes to complete the survey and give us feedback on how we did and how we can improve. We thank you for your attention and look forward to offering you more webinars on the subject of supercharging your online presence. Have a great day.